Okay, so we're on, we're live, we're going. Um, the thing is, it's like, there's a lot of like, when you think about the concept of like opportunity, right? You think about like, people say, "Oh, I want opportunity, I need opportunity, I need opportunity." And you look at like a marketplace, right? And you see a marketplace and you see like, people making money, people doing business, people exchanging this, all these things.
Mhm.
And so you say, I look at the marketplace and I say, oh, you know what? There's not opportunity, or there is opportunity over there. I need to go, these types of things, right? But the idea is like this. The idea is like this. The idea is to say that creativity going forward is the ability to look for opportunities to unify, right? Like any opportunity that you see unify, you're going to find a whole new opportunity. So like what we're doing, the Torah tells us to unify. The Torah tells us to connect, right? And because I think what's really intensified this like experience for me, is not only living in Jerusalem for 8 years, but like and people don't realize like living in Jerusalem is not just like, oh wow, it's a holy place. It's not just that. I mean, for sure, it has a tremendous amount of energy that fries people out, but it's another thing also, which is like when you go outside and you see the old city and you see these like old stones and these types of things. You think you're like, wow. You think about the base of Migdash, you think about David Melech, you think about Shlomo Melech, you think about the Shekhinah, and then people like me even go far to even go up. And so when you have those experiences over and over again, you just realize like, you know what, everything's just Hashem. You know what I mean? Like that's the reality. Now, where's the point? Where am I going with it? The point is just saying that because we're looking to unify, we've stumbled upon marketplaces now. Now we're saying like, hey, you know what? I just wanted to connect to my Hebrew Israelite brothers and my African brothers, but then I'm starting to see like, whoa, you know what? There's buying power there, there's innovation, there's networks. Anyways, okay. So with that being said, it's just saying that like the learning process, the learning process is a process that allows us to unify things like cause and effect, especially like when we're learning like things like Musar, like we're doing, right? Cause and effect. Like, okay, I did this and this is the response and this is the outcome, right? You know what I mean? That type of thing. And this is how to reverse it, this, blah, 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 blah. And so the point is just saying when we look at that and then we're able to say, like, hey, if I say this or if I do this, these reactions are happening, right? These reactions are happening based off of like what I did and what I'm saying. That means that I'm able to bind in my everyday functioning life who I am, what I'm doing, the response to the universe to what I'm doing, and the outcome of that experience with me with that response, going further. So you're learning a new, like they would say in academia, you're learning a new cognitive process of reasoning, right? And so it's important to be aware of that, because when we go over this and we refine ourselves and we learn it and this thing, it's so important because you know with the understanding of like say Kabbalah, for example, right? For sure you could put things in structures, for sure, which is a very very high level. But the thing is that the struggle of learning what the simple words are saying, right? The struggle of understanding where the commentators are coming from, where Chazal was coming from, and those things, it breaks you. That allows that light of Kabbalah to come in a different way. right? And and it's every year is different. Every year is more refined, more refined. Like, you know, you're there, I'm here, you know, we're learning together. So it's like we're going up, right? And so it's just saying that, but it's just important to have in mind, because like the other nations, like the Gentile nations, when they learn Torah, it's purely at best it's academic. And even the Jews that say that they're, you know, people say they're Jewish, but they're like these academics that are in colleges that teach the Talmud and they could quote all this, blah, blah, but they keep no Torah, no Shabbat, no mitzvahs, no nothing. That it hasn't went inside. You know what I'm saying? And so like that process of letting it get inside of us is so important. You know what I mean? When we're learning, it's just like letting it. The rabbis used to stress that so much in yeshiva, you know, to like let the learning become inside of you. You know, don't over intellectualize it, you know, but struggle to understand, right? Over intellectualizing from the standpoint of, you know, like you see a lot of Christians, like they'll read the Bible and they'll just come up with something, right? And you could do that, right? For sure. God gave us a brain. But the discipline and the refinement is to be able to go through the history of learning, those traditions that were passed down, to understand that system, that system of refinement, that system of critical thinking, that system of people who came to internal like clarities within themselves to get that, and that was passed down, it was scrutinized. That's the genius of Rashi and Tosfos, right? Because Rashi is their grandfather, right? And they're going through his works and they're scrutinizing it, and in some cases even disagreeing, right? But they're still in that tradition, and in Rashbam and all these different people that come after that, you know what I mean? And so it's saying that refinement and that discipline is what creates that vessel that, like, okay, so when Rabbi Shimon says like this, now you went from the pashat, and now you just blast it off, right? You're just like, whoa, like that's why for me a lot of Kabbalah stuff now is heavy. You know, I'm just like, hey, you know what? Let me sit down. You know what I mean? Like, because it's like, because it's not just that you learned a new idea, is that you're physically different. You physically have been invoked by this nuance. Now, like when we're learning HaYasher, these are new funk for both of us, right? New ways of living. Like I'm doing the Shema. I never did the Shema before I left the house like that. You know what I mean? I did it in Tefillah. I do it before I go to sleep. These types of things. But just the thing, and even when you have inclinations, when you feel something's going wrong, or so for me, I could smell it sometimes, like things doing the Shema at those moments. So I'm saying, so these ideas, these are new technologies, and it's like we're like a computer, and we're just downloading new softwares. You know what I'm saying? And we're just downloading these new softwares, and so every piece, every chapter, every piece is is that. So I just, that's kind of like the idea I just wanted to go into, because it's so important. Like, you know, we have students, just because we live in such an intellectual society, and everybody thinks they're smart through academia. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you went to school, you got this degree, you're smart. No, you're not. Stop it. You know nothing about yourself. Don't say you're smart unless you have information. You know what I mean? You could go in the workforce and get busy. I mean, for sure. You know, you got skill sets. We're on 2021.
Yes. Yes. Pretty sure it is 21.
Bro, things are moving fast. That's all I gotta say.
All about that soul, Rav. I hear
Mm.
you. All about the soul.
About the
Uh,
song?
we are in, yeah, we're in 21.
My what?
No, I said it's all about the soul. Like I
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
you.
yeah, 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 yeah. All right, so let's jump into this. I haven't looked at it. I don't know where it's going to take us. Ketiv Beisefer Tehilim. So he brings it tequila, and it says, "Arov Avedecha Letov Al Shina." It's a pasuk in Psalms that says, "Be the guarantor for your servant for the good. Do not allow the arrogant to oppress me." It says this. This verse can be understood by an analogy of a man burdened with many debts, but with enough silver and other valuables to satisfy all his creditors. Okay, so I just want to be clear. So he brings this verse, and his verse says, "A guarantee to your servant for the good. Do not allow the arrogant to oppress me." Okay, this verse could be understood by the analogy of a man burdened with many debts. So a guy has a lot of debts, but with enough silver and other valuables to satisfy all of his creditors. However, since the creditors were unaware that he has enough for each of them, all all of them they all intend on um, confiscating whatever they can. Okay, so this guy, he owes a lot of money. He has enough money to pay people off, but the people that he's paying off don't realize that he has to pay all these other people off. So when they come around, they try to take everything that they can, right? They try to confiscate. For each one is afraid that the debtor will pay another and leave him with nothing. So now they do know about each other. So that's why they're trying to get as much as they can because they're competing with each other and taking from this guy. So he's dealing with this dilemma. The only solution is for the debtor to find a guarantor who will keep the creditor at bay while he sells his merchandise. Okay, so for them, the solution is to bring in some type of third party. Then, when he has enough money in hand, he can pay each of them what he owes him. In this way, he will be saved from injury, loss loss of reputation, and other misfortunes that result from hounding of predators. Then when he has enough money to pay them, he okay. Then he has enough money to pay them each, and he owes them. And in this way, he will sell. Okay, so he wants to pay them back. In this way, he is saved from injury, loss of reputation, and other misfortunes that result of hounding creditors. Okay, there we go. It seems to me this is what David Amalek meant when he wrote, "Be a guarantor for your servant is good." Okay, very nice. That is, he wished that the Holy One, blessed be He, to serve as his guarantor against his accusers and and pursue to prevent them from falling upon on the prefix of some misdeed on his part. So it's interesting point. So he's saying like this. So he brings his pasuk, and his pasuk says, "Be a guarantor for your servant for good," right? And not let he says. So that's what he means by that, right? So what he brings an analogy, and he says like basically there's this guy he has a bunch of money he owes, and he's paying everyone off, and the people they don't realize how much he owes by who or this, but he knows he owes other people, so they worry about not getting anything, so they come over to take the whole thing, right? And so he's battling them off this whole time. And so what they do is they bring this third party that comes in and says, "Hey, I will be his guarantor." And that will give him enough time to sell off certain items to pay everybody off and save his reputation and good deeds, and nothing happens. So he's saying, so in this way, this is what he's saying Hashem is for us, right? Hashem is the entity, right? So he says, and he wishes that the Holy One, blessed be He, to serve as his guarantor against his accusers and pursuers to prevent them from falling upon him on the pretext of some misdeed of his part. For he is also he also possessed many merits and counterbalance debts of his transgression. Therefore, he adds, "Do not allow the arrogant to oppress me," which indicates that his accusers were waiting for the day when this sinner would fall upon their face, for they wish to collect what he owes in the form of sin and transgression by carrying out sentences in a heavenly court when he's found guilty. Woo, that's heavy, man. So he's saying like this. He's saying that he's saying you owe the money, right? And you're paying it off, right? You're paying off the money, but you still owe, right? You still owe the money, but you're paying it off. So he's saying that the only way that we could have God as our guarantor is by being close to God, right? He says, but because if God's not our guarantor, right, and we don't have that relationship, and we may be paying off the debt, but if we don't have God guaranteeing us, that evil side, that dark side, can take the monies that debt we do owe, meaning our sins, right? Because really the debt is our sins, right? So we have our averas, right? We did this, we do this, we did that, we did that. God forbid, but it happens, right? So we give away light to the dark side, right? We give it to the Sitra Aka, to the Klipa Noga. We give it away, right? And so that is a deficit, right? We're creating a deficit there, right? And so when we're doing tshuva, we're taking those sparks of light that we gave away and we're bringing it back to the holy side, right? But only through the tshuva, right? And so if we're doing tshuva and we're close to Hashem, that darkness that we created, right? We have enough time to pay it off, right? We have time, we have time. We have however much time we need to do tshuva to erase those sins, right? Sometimes Yom Kippur, Baruch Hashem, we have Kavana, it happens every year, right? But the point is, we can do it every day. And so the idea is to say that if we're not close to Hashem, that debt that we created will go up to the Shemaim and it will testify against us, right? So when we bring ourselves close to Hashem, that's what it says. Okay, so it says veharbe veziyot sirikin al ha'adam she'iseh zekai bigado. So it says ha'cheshbon vehadikiduk heshbon diduk. All right, so he says like this. He says, when a person possesses much merit to be found innocent, for the reckoning is through and exact. So when a person possesses a merit to be found innocent, for the reckoning is through and exact. Is through and exact. For it's written in the Midrash, in Mishlei, Rabbi Ishmael says, woe for that shame, woe for that disgrace. Along will come one who has mastered scriptures but not Mishnah. And the Holy One, blessed be He, will turn His face away from him and allow the agents of Gehinnom to overwhelm him like wolves in the evening. They will take him and cast him into Gehinnom among all those who mastered two sections of the Mishnah. And the Holy One, blessed be He, will ask him, my son, why did you not master the law? If the Holy One, blessed be He, says, leave him, fine, but not, they will retreat. They will treat him as they did the first one. Along will come one who mastered the laws, and they will ask him, my son, why did you not master Torah's Kohanim of the Halakha Midrash on Vayikra? He says, for it contained the laws of defilement by small creatures in forms of purification for them. The defilements and purification from the skin plate, the defilement and purification of the house, the male, the flow of the woman after the childbirth, the menstrual cycle, in order to confess on the Yom Kippur the laws of pledge and comprehensive summary of the Torah law contain Parsha Kedushim, the laws of sacrifice, the laws of Jubilee. This is big. So there's an email there, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Vehani Kudu Mutav, Ve'im Lav Osin Lo, Kimishpat Ve'rishon. And he says, if the Holy One, blessed be He, leave him be. He said, that is fine. He says, if the Holy One, blessed be, says, leave him be, that is fine. But if not, they are to treat him as they did the first one. Along will come a master. Wait. Oh, it's saying it over. Along will come a master who mastered Torah Kohanim, and they will ask him, "Why did you not master the 5 books of Moses?" So I guess what he's going to now, they're saying if a person learned all of say Torah, the 5 books, the Tanakh, as many of our brothers, but they didn't learn the laws, the Mishnayot, right? He says they get nothing. So I guess now he's saying it like this: if you only learn the Mishnayot, right? So he says if he asks, he says he comes along a person who mastered the Torah's Kohanim, and they will ask him, why did you not master off of 5 books of the Torah? He says, for they contain the Shema and many commandments, for such as the tefillin and the mezuzah and all will come, and one who mastered all of these, they will ask him, why didn't you study and master the Agada? So he's saying, even if you learn all of if you learn all of the 5 books of Moses, but you don't learn the Mishnah, you're out. If you learn all of the Mishnah, if you learn all the Gemara, but you barely know the 5 books of Moses and the Tanakh, and you haven't mastered this, you're out. And if you did both of those, he's going to ask you, why didn't you master the Agada, the stories? That's the Gemara bit. I don't just saying the Gemara is a God. I'm saying there's a God in the Gemara. Okay, so people hear that, like, oh my God, what we could say. Okay, so along will come a master who says, and he says, why didn't you not study the Agada? For the Torah, for a Torah scholar sits and interprets these texts. Hashem grants atonement to the sins of Israel. So as we learn this text, as we learn these things, we build our it's bro. You understand? What I was just saying to you before, I did not know this was. I did not read this Kai HaYasher. Like I'm just saying, like I was just, I was just talking about the commentaries and the building blocks and the commentaries. This is right here. That means it's a Shekhinah in the air. Yeah. All right. So it says Hashem grants atonement for Israel's sins. He says, moreover, when the listener responds, Amen, Yi Ratzon. Wait, so yeah, Yimshir Rabba. So Yishim Rabba. So he says at the end of the lesson in the Agada, even if a decree has been written and sealed against him in heaven, God forbid, and atone for his sins, along will be a master, and along will come to who mastered the Agada, and the Holy One, blessed be, he will say to him, why have you not learned the Gemara, which is called the sea of the Talmud? He says, concerning this, it's written, all streams flow to one sea, and it includes Gemara. Wait, wow, this is crazy. Okay, wait, let's get this. This is so yeshivish, by the way. Okay, so Hashem grants atonement for the sins of Israel. Moreover, when people they answer, okay, at the end of a Gada lesson, okay, even if a decree is written and sealed against him, Hashem will forgive him and atone for him for his sins. Along with one who has mastered the Gada, the Holy One, blessed be he, will ask him, why didn't you master Gemara, which is the sea of the Talmud? Concerning this, all streams are written in one flow. Okay, so he's saying, so even if you do all of the Agada, you still got to learn Gemara. See, this is the system, bro. This is the key, is to walk around and you think about it like, you think about all those books on the shelf. You think like, how could I fit that in my brain, right? But then you think about it like you could see the whole galaxy, right? Which is much more than a bookshelf, right? So if you could do that, you could do this. So it says, Ba'im beyado in Gemara. Hakadosh Baruch Hu Omer Lo Beni Ho'ila Benita Askatada Bigamara Safita. So he says, along will come a one who's mastered the Gemara, and the Holy One, blessed be he, will ask him, my son, since you toiled in the Gemara, did you contemplate the throne? For only when I have the pleasure from my words, when the Tower scholars engage in study and glimmers and peers and beholds and contemplates from the Talmud studies how the thrones of glory stand. Yes. Yes, we have to be thinking about the thrones of glory while we're learning Torah right now. Yes. And and how the first leg stands for and what it's used for, and how the second leg is in the third leg and the fourth legs, and how the chamishal is situated, to all the different directions it turns every hour, and which wind is used by the lightning of which by the cherubim, how the cherubim and the ministering angels stand and minister. And most important of all is the glory, the throne of glory, the Kisi HaKavod. And he says that the throne of glory is situated and it is circular and is fashioned like a frame, established like a bridge. How many bridges does it contain over each one of them? Each one contain over which one I do pass. Every upon each bridge the open pass. Upon the bridge do the wheels of the throne pass. It is not. So he's bringing a pasuk now. He says, "It is not my glory, my magnificence, my splendor of my beauty when my children appreciate my glory." Said, "Is it not my glory, my magnificence, my splendor, my voice?" So when we're learning Torah, we have to be thinking about the greatness of Hashem. We not just the greatness of Hashem in terms of a word, like God is great, but this the idea of picturing the Kisi HaKavod and not putting God in the spiritual, but the vibrations of energy that we understand. Like when we see the constellations, and I'm not comparing the two, but I'm just giving an idea. When we look at the constellations, and they say, "Oh, well, this is shaped like a bird, or this is shaped like a scale, this is shaped like a crab, or whatever." Those shapes, we're just applying that to it, right? So it's the same thing. Hashem is infinite, right? Hashem's infinite. But what we can do is we can apply this idea that there is this aspect of Hashem's glory that expresses itself at this certain level that we can comprehend. And at this level of our comprehension, we apply the concept of a Kisi HaKavod, right? A heavenly throne. This is what we apply to it, but it's not to say that that's what it is, but that's the way we can understand it. Hine mim ze adam asher yukal le'amod bechaki ele. Who can possibly stand? Who could possibly stand up to such an inquiry? So they asked the question: if you're saying that's the level, who could do it? Who could stand and say, "I know the Midrash, I know the Gemara, I know this"? I know. Who could say this? Who's mastered these things, right? Who can possibly stand up to such an inquiries? He said, "This is prompted by our sages to declare in Bereshit Rabbah, woe to the day of judgment, woe to us the day of rebuke. Nevertheless, one must either one must neither slacken nor become depressed. For the Holy One, blessed be He, is examining the hearts and searches out the kidneys. And He sees that a person indeed is clean to the good, that his soul wishes to pursue Torah and good deeds, and that it was only it's only the vanquishing or not using time correctly that causes him to fall short. Concerning this, it does not matter. It does not matter whether one did much or little, as much as his intention were for the sake of heaven. Okay, so let's try to figure this out. So the thing is like this. He's saying, what if we fall short of this? He's not saying we're exempt. He's not saying we're exempt. But he's saying, what if we don't in our lifetime, for whatever reason, get a chance? Like there's people who live like in like places in Europe and places in the Middle East where they told them you can't study Torah, right? This is the whole concept of Hanukkah, right? Like they were like, you can't do these things anymore. It's out. So what if a person's in that? Are they out? And he says, no, you study what you can. It's about how you use your time, right? How you use your time. What are you using your time for every day? Okay, yes, we have to earn a living. But outside of that, what are we using our time for? Because we have to cover these subjects. We have to cover these subjects, these subject matters. We have to know Mishnayot. We have to know Gemara. We have to understand Halakha, right? How we understand Halakha today. We have to understand the Midrashim. We have to understand the Agada. We have to understand the sages, the Kabbalah, all these things, right? the different works that came throughout history. We have to know these things. We don't have time to waste. And that's why he's saying the sages warn us, woe to us the day of judgment. We have to be in constant study. This is the key. And we're breaking down levels of klipa. We're loosening the control of the sitra akra over ourselves, over our feet. So it says, Ve'ahi tami debe simcha ka shebe leyado asmech asech mitzvah. So he says a person must always rejoice when he has the opportunity to become involved in the fulfillment of any commandment. He must rejoice. Any commandment right now, we like, wow, we're doing the mitzvah of Torah like every minute. We're doing every second right now. We're thinking about Hashem. And so he says, for whomever performs them joyously is beloved and precious to the Holy One, blessed be He. In the Zohar, the Zohar Chadash, the Chadash, it says that it was the very beloved matter. It's a very beloved matter to the Holy One, blessed be He, when He sees the Father rejoicing when His Son becomes obligated to fulfill the commandment. Upon reaching the age of 13, for this reason, there is a great obligation to make a feast on that day, for it brings joy to the Holy One, blessed be He. The Zohar relates a story of Rabbi Yitzhak, who says, from the age of 13 onward, one is obligated to fulfill the commandments. And on that day, it is the duty of the righteous to celebrate as if it were a wedding day. This is the bar mitzvah. In the merit of the Holy One, blessed be He, will become aroused, will one day arouse them to dispatch a herald ahead of them, proclaiming joyous, go out and see the daughters of Zion. So in the future. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, mitele sai ishina ule ayla reina ba'e lema cheve. So he says, and Rabbi Eliezer says, from the age of 13 and up, if a person wishes to be a tzaddik, he is granted a holy soul on the high, craves out from the beneath the king's throne of glory. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai invited the Pinjnitz, the master of the stores, to partake in the great bar mitzvah feast that he made for his son Rabbi Eliezer. He covered his entire house with precious vessels and seated scholars on either side. And the rejoicing was indeed great. The scholars said to him, Why is our teacher joys greater on this day than on another day? Rabbi Shimon answered, on this day a holy soul is descended from on high upon the four wings of a chasov to my son Rab Eliezer. And at this feast my joy is complete. He seated his son Rabbi Eliezer beside him, saying, sit, my son, for today the Holy One, blessed be He, is sanctifying you with a lot of holy ones. After Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had said one word, that the house was surrounded with fire. The scholars went out and saw the smoke rising from the house all that day. Along came Rav Yossi and found them standing in the marketplace, staring in amazement. He said to them, the smoke that is rising from the house of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is because on this day, his son Rabbi Eliezer is being crowned with the holy crown. The scholars watch as the pillars of fire descend, and Rav Yossi remained there until the fire had departed. They all rejoiced, saying, let this rejoice be complete in all the blessings of Rabbi Shimon's son Rabbi Eliezer, and sat there sharing in their happiness and engaging in study. Well, they're bringing that thing out, Doug. He says, Ashrei le'adam ve'tov lo, and he says, fortunate is the man who fulfills the commandments, causing one's holy soul to cling to another. The crown is with the crown and is crowned with the holy crown. But this is only true if he sets aside a fixed time for Torah study and engages in acts of kindness and good deeds. But if he goes after his heart's desire, pursuing gluttony and drunkenness and spending all of his days in business and wasting his time on the needs of his body rather those of his soul, then his holy soul abandons him. And he says, and this is since the nature of that is since the nature is that of a beast concerning this was written in the holy and written in the Zohar. So he says, and since the nature of that is a beast concerning this is written in the Zohar. Rav Yehuda says, "Woe to the wicked who do not wish to cling to the partners of the Holy One, blessed be." We have to cling to Hashem. That's it. We have to cling to Hashem. That's it. There's nothing else. There's nothing else. There's only Hashem. You know what I'm saying? Like that. That's it. That's all we have. We can't count on anything. You could count on Hashem's protection. That's it. We're blind. We can't see. We can't hear. We're totally limited. And so he says, woe to the wicked who wish not to cling to the partner of the Holy One as a partner to the Holy One. Blessed be He. Wait, this good. Woe to those who wish not to cling to the partner of the Holy One. Blessed be He. And who is this? Rav Yitzhak has said, this is the soul that the Holy One, blessed be He, has instilled inside of him. Ooh. And he says, instead he clings to the behavior of the beast. So he's saying, he says, we don't, Hashem gave us a partner. Who's the partner? Our soul. And he says, we don't cling to the soul, we cling to the body like a beast. This is the meaning of the verse. But a man does not endure in splendor. He is likened he's likened to silent animals, for also that he will write in a similar manner. Velama lo yichashav ha'adam kilo bara hakadosh baruch hu oto ela livavodo. So he says, and why do people not consider that the Holy One, blessed be He, has only created them for His honor and not to fulfill their appetites? That's it. We're not here for the body consciousness. We're here for the soul consciousness, and we use the body consciousness to serve Hashem. When we're eating food, we're serving Hashem. We're elevating the sparks of those holy foods. We're bringing down Kedusha. We're elevating, we're bringing light. We're fulfilling mitzvot. This is what we're eating for. We're doing Brachat Hamazon. We're doing Netilat Yadayim. We're saying bracha. We're saying words of Torah. That's just the eating. So he says, why do people not consider that the Holy One, blessed be He, has only created them for His honor and not to fulfill their appetites? If only a person would take to heart and know how they cursed Him on high for His lack of concern over the Creator's honor. He's like, you're cursing Hashem, God forbid. Everything is to serve Hashem. You're married is to serve Hashem. It's not like, I'm married, I don't want to be alone. No, it's a way to serve Hashem through marriage. It's the highest level. And so he says, and how fitting is it that a person should run to see his Creator's deeds? So the Zohar says, the son of Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, when the sun inclined its wings to go forth by the might of its will, trampling over the hooves of the leaves of the Garden of Eden, then all the holy beings, the kings of the throne, the kings of all the holy beings, the king's throne of glory, the spice of Gan Eden, and the tree of the heaven, the spice of Gan Eden and its trees, the heavens and the earth and their host, and all that trembles and gives praise and acknowledges to their master, they all rise to see the explicit holy name engraved upon the sun in its journey, and they give it praise to the Holy One. Then a voice is heard proclaiming, woe to the creatures who do not contemplate the glory of the King. This is written, this as it is written, all the host of the heavens bow down to you, says in Nehemiah. It also is taught in the next verse, when the Holy One, blessed be He, entered Garden of Eden after midnight, after midnight, together with all the righteous, then all the gates of heaven are open, and it is favorable time to engage in study. At that time, the bands of ministering angels and all the spices of Gan Eden burn out and extinguish, and the song along with the righteous before the before the extinguish the song along with the righteous before the Holy One, blessed be He. Kadahu Ketiv. So it's written in Tehillim. So it says, this is what this verse means. Surely the righteous will acknowledge your name. The upright will dwell in your presence. When will the righteous give thanks to your name? When the upright dwells in your presence. That is, when they sat before you in Gan Eden at midnight. Afterwards, the three bands of ministering angels that are appointed over the watches of the night. That we can learn that it's a whole study in Masechet Brachot, the three watches of the night. And he says, but now we're learning in a deep level. Now they're saying the times of the Shema. We're saying, there's three different times where he says where three different aspects of angels are released. So he says afterwards, three bands of ministering. He says three bands of ministering angels are released that are appointed to watch over the night and sing songs until dawn. At dawn, it is Israel's duty to rise with strength and offer songs and praise before the king. You have to have God in mind while this is going on. Why is this? Because they take over the serving after the ministering angels finish. So why do we have to wake up and pray? We just learned a huge kiddush. This is a huge moment. I wish I had like a bell to ring. This author is saying, he's bringing the Zohar, and he's saying the reason why we have to wake up and pray and do praises throughout the day, because we're taking over guard duty for the angels that come throughout the night process. So they do their shift, and we come in, and then we take over. This is crazy. So this is why we take. This is why he says we take over serving after the ministering angels finish. Moreover, at the time of the Holy One, blessed be He, is found nearer to earth. This is the meaning of the verse, and those who seek me will find me. He said the word for those who seek me, he said, contains the word for dawn, shachar. And so he says, Rabbi Yehuda provided that they do not leave off until it's time to pray at sunrise. All right, you got to stay up. All right. Amar Rebbe Yochanan, the Amar Rav, Beishi Hachadosh Baruch Hu, Yotzei Me'otan Ha'olamot. And he says, and Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rav, when the Holy One, blessed be He, when the Holy One, when the Holy One, blessed is He, exit through those worlds. Okay, all right, let me get this right. Okay, Rav Yochanan said in the name of Rav, when the Holy One, blessed be He, He exists, he exit those worlds that He desires and enters Gan Eden's. Therefore, together with the righteous, He pauses to see whether he heard the sounds of Torah study. For it is taught that that's that sound is more pleasing to Him than all the songs and praises that are recited by the ministering angels on high. As it's written, I descend upon the nut garden and see, etc. It says in Shir Hashem. He says, what is meant by to see, right? He says to observe and engaging in Torah study. So he's saying, like, they're giving us this thing of this force that we understand of this aspect of the Creator, right? Because nothing's a totality. In the Garden of Eden, in this force that represents an aspect of the expression of the Creator, is walking in the Garden of Eden with the righteous. And he says, he pauses and he listens, and what is he listening for? What is he listening for? Torah study. Whose Torah study? Ours. Okay. So he says, and so he brings a verse, And he says, I descended into the nut garden to see. And so they says, and he asks, what does it mean to see? Rabbi Yitzhak says to see, he says to observe, to see, to those engaged in Torah study. Rabbi Yitzhak says Gan Eden is called the nut. He said is Garden of Eden called the nut garden? Like I never heard of that. He says in Rabbi Yelchanan replied, yes, certainly Gan Eden is called the nut garden, just as a nut is sealed up from every side and is surrounded by many shells, so too is Gan Eden sealed up on many sides and surrounded by numerous defenses so that it cannot be seen by any angel and be held by the prophets. Thus it's written, no man can see it except for you, O God. Rabbi Shimon says, at one time I was standing before Rabbi Baroka, and he said to me, so shall I merit the level of Nut Garden together with the pious of Israel. But I did not understand what he meant until I heard from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that the Holy One, blessed be He, is referred to it refers to Gan Eden as the nut garden, just as a nut is surrounded by many shells, while the fruit is situated in the middle. So is Garden of Eden is a garden on the inside, while Eden is on the outside. Man, this is like crazy stuff right now. Ashrei mi misheholech ha-tamim. Woo! Fortunate is who walks innocently and toils in Torah, and whose ways are all for the sake of heaven. For this soul is prepared to enter Eden, which is called the Nut Garden. That is the world to come. Okay. Yeah. So, thoughts, reflections.
Um, wife just joined a few minutes ago.
So,
Um, that's a heavy one, Ralph.
yeah,
Man, he went deep into it because where we started from was just like understanding the importance of you have to study and not only study, you have to. There's I want to say it's in the Talmud somewhere. It might be in a Midrash, but it says that like the work is long, and the overseer is like demanding, but you have to get it done. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You have to get it done. It's not oh, yeah, I'm gonna study a little bit. No, 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 no. It's all being weighed out. You need to put that work in. And from there, how it just went to, the time to arise at midnight, and to keep studying. This has happened to me before. Like I'll get up at midnight and study all the way through. Then as soon as it gets to dawn, I'm like, oh, I'm going to sleep. So I just fall asleep. It's like, oh, but I did enough. No, you didn't. You didn't do enough. You didn't finish the job. You know what I mean? So this is
yeah.
this
It happened to me all the time. It happened to me last night. I woke up. I feel like I got it in. I got
right.
a couple 30 minutes in. I passed back out. I read this. I'm like, oh man.
So yeah, this one was powerful just to, understand your obligation, your opportunity. The
Yep,
opportunity to do these things with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's waiting for your words of Torah. He's waiting for you to cleave to him. He wants that from you. And that's what you're designed for. That's the purpose of your design. Why do you have a mouth to praise Hashem? Why do you have hands to do good deeds, to wrap the feelings? Why do you have feet to rush to do good deeds? You know what I mean? You're designed to serve your master. All these other things in life, it's like, okay, you get caught up in it. Oh, you like money, you like these things. That's not the purpose of it. It's not the purpose. So it's like keeping your focus on the things that are primary. Don't make what's secondary primary. You know,
there's a story I heard years ago, and it was about a king who had this like crazy like illness that like none of the people in his kingdom could come and help him. He had this guy, whatever, blah blah. And so it was this one guy who was like, he was like kind of like a Jewish guy, whatever, and he like knew some mysticism stuff, whatever. And the people were getting very desperate, right? They were getting very desperate about the king's health and this. And so the king got to a point where he says, hey, if anybody could heal me, I'll give him X amount of money and then this, and it just kept going up as his condition got worse. He got to the point where he says, "Hey, you know what? Whoever fixes me, whoever could help me, could have this whole treasure that we have, right?" And they had like this football stadium is like high of like gold and this and just from different things they conquered or whatever. So, anyways, so the guy who lived in the community who knew some of the like mysticism stuff, you know, said, okay, maybe I'll go, I can help him out, So he goes to the king and he starts, praying with them and teaching them things, whatever. And slowly the king's health gets better and better and better. So the king, as he's getting better, he starts to realize, like, wait, I just gave away half of the wealth of the empire to this guy, I mean, like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it's like, well, I don't know what I was thinking. I was in a lot of pain, whatever. So he changes his mind and he says, hey, since this guy healed me, I'm going to I'm not going to give him the treasure, but rather what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him like these like this huge trucks, these cargo trucks, and he could go inside of the treasure room and take as much as he wants. And he has 12 hours, right? He has from the sun rising to the sun setting, right? He has those hours, right? All right, fine, right? He changed his mind, but whatever. Somebody's better than nothing, right? So the guy accepts that. And so the king does additional research, right? The king does additional research about this guy, and he finds out that this guy loves music. And he loves like this like these like salmon, they're like salmon rolls. Like he loves these salmon rolls. He loves like certain like mixed drinks. He loves these things, right? And so so the king finds out, and he loves music, right? So what does the king do? The king hires the best musicians in the world. He finds in all the different things, and he has them come to the area, right? And they perform and they do whatever together. And so he has them go into the treasure room where the guy goes into. And not only that, he has the best like chefs, right? The whole team, the best chefs. They go in there and they're making like all of his favorite foods, everything that he likes, the drinks, the whole thing. And so when he walks in, they have people there waiting and they're greeting him. It's like, oh, the king loves you. It's like, we're so happy you're here. Look, we have your favorite musicians over here. We have your favorite food. Enjoy, and all whatever you want here as the gold. Just enjoy. We have, and by the way, we have your favorite couches. Your wife told us you like these couches, so we got these couches. So you have your food, everything set up. He's like, oh my god, I love this. So what happens? So he goes, he's listening to music, and he's enjoying it, and he's thinking about what is he going to get, what types of things, because he's not just listening to music, but he's looking around. He's saying like, okay, I'm going to get that, I'll put that in there, whatever, blah blah. And it goes on and it goes on, and they bring out dancers, and he's like, Nick, it's a whole show. And so what happens is that he just had this feeling, and he realized that, wait, I only got like an hour, right? Before the sun sets, because I only have 12 hours, right? And I've had the best time. I've been enjoying, right? So when he gets up and he panics. And then he starts grabbing stuff and putting it in his trays and dumping in the car, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he does an hour worth of that, and boom, that was it. The guards come and say, that's it. So the point is of that story is to say that we're in this world to transform our souls, right? That's what we're here for. We all are. God put us in this world to go through a series of experiences to transform our soul. And unfortunately, we live in a society that doesn't even acknowledge the soul, right? They don't even acknowledge you go to school. So stop. We can't scientifically prove that. No, it doesn't exist. But you need that. And I said this before. You need that so you could have no scientific inquiry, right? In terms of my personal identity. Like if I'm going to say that I'm a sovereign individual in the United States, right? I have the sovereignty, right? I live amongst the United States. I agreed to be a citizen. If I didn't want to be, I could leave. The United States does not keep me here or keep anyone there. And I agree with the laws and the things that I want to see changes. I work in a democratic format where if I want to see change, I go and connect with other people who are like-minded, and we do it as a collective society, right? But what I'm saying is, if you said that I have a soul, that means that that self-definition as it relates to the political system changes. Because now I'm going to take in account that there's another set of needs that are not being addressed in this conversation, right? You're only dealing with the external self, right? You're not dealing with the internal self. You're dealing with the external self. So my internal self also is part of this sovereign experience too. So why is that not in the context? And then when you do that, then you really break down political power. Not saying you want to do. I'm not saying this. Not. I'm not saying about revolution. But what I'm saying is, you always have politics. You will always have a democracy. You always have a republic. However, the laws and the policies that will be instrumented will have more to have to do with my total being versus my external consciousness. So when we talk about the human condition and the purpose of the human being, they're holding by Darwin. They're like, hey, we were apes, and we progressed to this. And we're like, absolutely not. Adam was never in that. Adam had a soul. That's what makes us different according to Torah. We have a soul, right? So this whole dynamic of saying that, well, what is the purpose of life? Oh, well, the sages say the purpose of life is God created a reality that this soul can have this. You could call it a simulated experience if you want, where they're going to be challenged, invoked, pushed, elevated, lowered, this, all these type of experience, this, children, the whole thing. And they're going to have these experiences, and these experiences are going to transform this person to achieving, God willing, their potential in his lifetime, right? And by doing that, when that body that they use for, say, the 120 years, when that body has exhausted itself for the needs of that soul will continue on to another place, right? And that's determined what that place is. That's a whole nother conversation. But the point is the same when we talk about this, is that okay? So anyway, so back to what we were talking about yesterday. I want to touch on Mikeitz just for a second, and then I want to go into the halacha about the washing your hands and all that. But I want to just touch on the parsha because it's your husband's it's his birthday pasha. It's his birthday pasha. So we got to dig into it, and mainly the main thing that I want to get into is this idea, and this also ties into everything, by the way, to this whole idea of couples learning, right? And we kind of touched on it a little bit yesterday, but again, hold on, bring the screen up. Do this. Hold on. Okay, so the thing is like this. So the
You can turn it however you want to.
okay, cool. Okay, so so let's keep it going. Okay, so it's like this. Okay, so this is the thing. So when people are learning together, right? Like when we were in one of my rabbis used to one of my friends actually, I had one of my roommates, he said to me one time, he said, what is the essence of learning in what we would call we call it a shir or like a group? What is the power of having a rabbi per se, and you're learning in a group, right? And then from there, you as a group, you go and you learn, as in pairs, right? So like, what's going on here? Like, what's going on in this section of you're sitting at a table, there's a bunch of you guys, and your teacher pulls out, you made the 5 books of Moses, he pulls out the Talmud, he pulls out something, and he reads it and he explains it, right? And then you go with your friends into another room, right? And then you guys learn, and you guys learn that same thing and try to figure out how did he come to the conclusion that it meant X, Y, and Z, right? Now you think about that and you think like, well, why would I want to do that, right? Why would I not want to just read it and understand myself? Like, I read it, this is how I understand it. Why do I want to go through a system of learning? And I did this for years, by the way, every day, all day. This is what we did, right? We had 3 times a day, 3 stars a day, in the morning, in the afternoon, at night. And what we would do is we would sit with our Rav, He would give over a piece of Gemara, and then we would go and break into groups, and then we would go to try to understand why he said what he said. What did he see in the text? What were the words that imply this? What commentaries did he read that also agree with his position? If he didn't say it explicitly himself, he may bring a point on a commentary, not even the Gemara itself. You know what I'm saying? And we have to understand how he got to that conclusion, right? And so the power of that is twofold, right? In the beginning of the Torah, it says, Bereshit bara Elohim ed hashemayim v'haaretz, right? The heavens and the earth. So the heavens, let's understand it as the soul, and let's understand the earth as meaning the body, right? So when you're learning the Torah, you're learning about the spiritual aspects of it, and you're learning about the physical aspects of it. And so when you're learning Torah with someone else, you're learning about how they're communicating, right? And you're also understanding how they're thinking, right? Because ultimately, what you want to do when we're in those learning situations is to learn how the rabbi is thinking, right? Because if I can understand how my rabbi thinks, then that means I could get to a conclusion on how he got to that outcome much quicker. But if I don't take into account how he thinks, then I'm just going into the text and trying to connect the dots. I got to make it personal, right? And so when we learn with each other, I want to understand how that person thinks. So so for example, if I'm learning, if when I'm learning, like say with your husband per se, right? Like I would ask him, what is his thoughts or reflections, right? If we're face to face, maybe it'll be more line by line, right? But we got so much time, we can't do it. We're not spending all day learning, so we're going, section by section, right? But the point is, I'm interested to see how he thinks, how he heard what was being expressed, right? And I want to learn about him through that perspective. I want to learn about him, not just him intellectually. I'm learning about him intellectually. I'm learning about him psychologically. I'm learning about him emotionally because I'm listening to him, right? I'm listening that, like yesterday we were learning and he was saying like, we were talking about, being protected by your father's merits, right? And he said, wow, I felt that hit me, so that was him. He was connecting to his father. He's connecting to that experience and that connection, all that. So that was a deep insight, right? That's a deep insight on him as a person, right? Him as an individual. So it's just listening to that allows me to understand who he is as a person, right? And when people are prepared to open like that, that's that, right? You can understand it, or say, like today when he's talking about the idea of learning, right? And how you have to learn. You got to be a master. You got to know the verses. You got to know what's going on. You got to know the structure. You got to be able to say, oh yeah, that's just how it says in the Mishnah, Tanit. This is how it says by in the book of Esther. Oh, this is how it says by the Agada for Pesach. You know what I mean? Like having that in your mind, and the thing about it, it works so amazing for women, and that's why they tell men who have Torah scholars, men who are Torah scholars, to marry their daughter to Torah scholars, because men who learn Torah are more sensitive, right? Because they're taking more things into an account, right? Because when we're learning this, we're learning how women naturally do this in many ways, right? Women naturally are learning how their husband thinks. Men don't necessarily do that. We learn how our wife operates. You know what I'm saying? We're responding to she's in a bad mood, but we didn't get to the point what built that thinking and what are you know what I'm saying? So we could get in the world of preventative, right? And so that's the power of learning. So part of that is not just saying the verse, and I'm gonna show you just a little Torah I wrote today this morning, really for this class for you guys, but I just posted it on social media because it's just like I just share, whatever. But the point is like this. So the way that this is my system that I personally like learning. Like I said yesterday, I like to start with Rashi. Right now, Rashi. These are the ones that are in English, but there's a lot. There's a Rashi on the whole thing. Now, why is Rashi important to me? Right, Rashi is important to me because Rashi's approach is saying that he wants us to understand what the tradition teaches us, right? And this is a very important thing. Anybody can pick up the book and read it, and that's cool. and that's great. But there's another thing, because we are Israel, right? Because we're Zerah Israel, because we're the seed of Jacob, there's a tradition on how to learn it. There's a tradition on how to learn different words, different phrases, different concepts, right? There's a way to do that, right? There's a way to do it. Now you could do it your own thing, right? I mean, you could go to any church, and there's some preacher saying something. If I go to any shul in the world that's an Orthodox shul, I'm going to hear pretty much the same traditions of how to understand these verses. If say a rabbi speaking, right? And so because of that, it creates a deeper unification in speaking in one voice to God as Israel, right? And so what I do is I would read the verse and understand it in its classic sense, right? It's okay. It says here, 2 years time, Pharaoh dreamed, and that he was standing by the Nile, right? So on this particular area, right, there's over 135 commentaries, right? That's just here. This I'm using this app because I don't have a library of books in front of me. If I was in yeshiva, I'd just pull it out and show you, hey, this is Rashi says like this. But here, I'm doing it. So the reason why I like Rashi is because of his approach. His approach is he wants the individual to have the clear, basic understanding of what's being said in this verse, right? This verse or that verse, right? And there's different ways, there's different issues inside of every single verse, right? To understand that, right? So there's different issues, right? And so I will start with a Rashi, and then I would say, okay, so Rashi here is saying Rashi brings sources. That's another thing I like about Rashi. Rashi's not saying like I'm going to explain it to you. No, he's going to bring other teachings and other writings that are going to explain to you this writing, right? So here, when it says Ve'ahi Miketz, so he says Ve'ahi Miketz. So he said the Targum renders it by Misuf, Misuf at the end. Yep, Misuf. He says and it says all forms the noun ket signify the end or another one. Anyways, the point is he wants us to understand his word, right? Now, this is how I start, right? This is how I start. I start with a Rashi, and then this is my learning style that I developed that is very comprehensive for me. Okay, then I go to Dot Zikuni, right? So what is this? This is a compilation of writings from Rashi's grandchildren who study their grandfather's tradition, and they write about it, right? And so I would learn this next. So what they do is they talk about why their grandfather chose this versus that. There's famous books like called "Why Did Rashi Say?" Right? Why did Rashi bring this particular verse to explain this pasuk? Why did he bring this certain word syntax or whatever to explain this idea? Right. So this is just an idea. So his sons say like this. His grandkids. He says Vayhi Meketz. He says it was the end. According to Rashi, the word Meketz means at the end. He says the reason why Rashi was forced to give this interpretation, which to most of us is quite clear, is that there are occasions when this expression means at the beginning. He says one such example occurs in Jeremiah, where it says Miketz Shava Shinim Tesheloch Chafishi. So he says, at the beginning of the seventh year, you must release him to freedom. He's talking about a Jewish slave. He says, he said it cannot mean that he is to end. It's not. It cannot mean that it is to be released only at the end of 7 years. He says, and there's another verse. So the point is like this. This is the important idea. So you're reading Ve'ahi Mechetz, right? Okay, so Vayahi Maketz, right? So it says after 2 years' time. So Rashi understands after 2 years' time. That's what I'm saying. This is learning. After 2 years' time, Rashi comes and says what that means is at the end when it says Vayahi Maketz, right? Shana Tanim 2 Yamin years, right? Right? Right. So he's saying Vayahi Maketz. He's saying that he interprets that to mean at the beginning. At the end, right? At the end of 2 years. But if you read it in this English understanding, you will say after 2 years' time. Those are two different ideas. Mikeitz is saying at the end of 2 years. And then it says, oh, at the end, I did 2 years' time. 2 years' time, it says Pero, Cholim, Pero dreamed. Vehine Omed, and he says that he was standing al Ya'ir. It says HaYaor, right? HaYaor. So he's saying here that Yaor means Nile, but it doesn't say Nile. You understand what I'm saying? So it's saying that there's a way to read the Torah and have an English translation, or there's a way to learn it on how the tradition of how to understand it. So why is it important to understand the way Rashi is saying it? Because there's other implications connected to it. What are some of these other inclinations? So it says, Pero Cholim, right? He says, and Pero was dreaming, right? God's method of applying reward and punishment cannot be comprehended to any human system of doing so. So let's read this again. The method of applying reward and punishment cannot be compared to any human system of doing so. Human systems inflict wounds with a castle and metal and pain-causing instruments, while they apply only a flimsy plaster to heal the wound. God afflicts the wound that is God afflicts a wound that is superficial, like the application of a plaster, but when it comes to healing it, he uses immediately effective means. Joseph was thrown into the pit and accounted here Joseph had been thrown into a pit on account of a mere dream that he had concerning his brothers. He was healed by a dream dreamt when the most powerful ruler in the world, the king of Egypt. In other words, God employed a heavyweight on the earth in order to heal his wound. So the point is, he's going into that. He's making a point. That's not why I brought this point. The point is saying, actually, this is what I do. So I do an inquiry on Rashi, right? So if you don't want to start Rashi, you can start with whoever you want, but you should go and have an understanding of what Rashi is saying by that. And then from there, I go usually with, this is my third person I go, because I go down 3 levels. And visit I used to visit. So hold on. All right. So anyway, so the Orach Chaim. Orach Chaim is a tremendous commentary. I feel very close to the Orach Chaim. I used to when I was with Rabbi Pinchas Chief Rabbi Pinchas in the Old City, we would daven in Orach Chaim's shul in the Old City. The same shul, Orach Chaim picked that shul because that's the shul in the Old City where the Arizal had his bris milah, and they said the Eliyahu Navi was there, and so Orach Chaim had his shul there and his yeshiva, and it was like in this back area. It's like a little alley you got to go through, but you dive in there, and so you'll see the way he used to live was like, I guess he lived like maybe a couple of blocks away from where he lived. Where he would pray, right? So he had this prayer room, but then right down from his prayer room, he had a mikveh downstairs. And then outside the mikveh, they had like a study room. So you can see that the Orach Chaim will come from his house, go into the mikveh, come and study, and then go and pray, leave and go home and do the whole thing over and over again. And that was his reality. And I saw that and I was just like, God, okay, so this is what he writes. And I went to his gravesite a lot. And even when you see me put my Zoom on pause and you see me standing in front of that grave, it has a blue outline around it. Oh, no, that's not on here. That's on the other, that's on when I do it with Rob Zion. When I do things with Rob Zion, if you see me on pause, you see there's a picture of me standing in front of like this kind of like grave that's isolated from everything. It's the Orach Chaim, this person we're reading right now. His gravesite and the Chidah, so many people talk about. Anyways, so we learned, okay, so we learned this idea, right? So we learned this idea that Rashi talks about. He's teaching us the tradition on how to learn this verse, okay? And it's not after 2 years time. What we the way we learn it at the end of 2 years. And then Rashi's grandkid said that Rashi had to point that out because the same phraseology is used in other verses, and it means at the beginning of a time. And they bring examples of that in Jeremiah. So the Or Chaim is also working. Everyone's working around the same premise. So the Or Chaim comes hundreds of years later, and he says like this: it happened at the end of 2 years. So he's going off in Mikeitz, Ve'ahi Mikeitz Shanim Yamim. So what does he say? So this is why I love Or Chaim is so smooth in the way he writes. He just writes. He just says it like it is. So he says the reason the Torah introduces the paragraph with the word Vayahi is to indicate an unhappy event, right? So he's saying this word in our tradition, anytime you see this word, it's used in a happy event. And what I'm going to show you, what I wrote based off of these teachings I'm showing you, because I'm showing you how I learned it, and then how I was able to take it in my own thinking and rewrite it, right? So because that's the point. It's one thing to and you know this as a teacher, educator, one level of knowledge is listening, and or learning is one level is listening, another level is to be able to say it back, another level is to write down what was being said, and then the highest level is to be able to write it in your own words, right? So I write the Torah and I use social media because I'm able to take these ideas and from the sages from all these thousands of years of wisdom and embody them in myself and to be able to share them, right, with other people from my perspective. So that's what we're going to go to. So he says Ve'ahi. He says Ve'ahi is a tradition indicating a happy event. So anytime you see Ve'ahi or Ve'ahivu, you're learning that you're seeing that, and then it's one of the proofs that I bring. What I'm going to show you is in Parsha HaYasher, the life of Sarah. It starts. The first word is Vayachi Chaim, Chaim Sarah. They're saying that, and this was the life of Sarah. So that word Vayachi, the Or Chaim speaks on that commentary as well, and he speaks anytime you say Vayahi or Vayahivu. I think it's Vayahivu Chaim Sarah. Sorry. Yeah, so that's it. So he says that is an indication, and in the next parsha we learn Sarah dies, right? So they're preparing us. It's like Alfred Hitchcock, the music before the guy jumps out of the closet. That's what the Vayehi is, right? And so he says it's a bad event. And now he says as of now the exile of the Jewish people it starts, right? So because this is the beginning, right? When Pharaoh's having this dream, this is when Yosef is going to be brought to power, and eventually the famine happens because of that, which is going to bring his brothers into Mitzrayim, which is the beginning of them going in a slow process of becoming slaves, right? And which leads to Exodus. He says, even though the exile had been decreed almost 200 years previously, it had not been decreed anywhere that the exile had to be in Egypt. So he's saying during the times of Abraham said, he said, your future generations are going to be slaves in a foreign land. So he didn't say where. Moreover, this is why I love the Oricon. He's just going in. He's like, moreover, the exile turned out to be more cruel than necessary in order to satisfy God's decrees, as we know from the Tosfos on Shabbat 10. He said, and it's also written. It's also written as in the glossary of Maimonides, right? Hilkot Tshuva, right? In the 6th chapter, he explains that the Egyptians behave abnormally cruel a manner as indicated by Genesis, similar to white people in America. So he says, and he goes off to this word it has here. He says an additional reason for introducing this paragraph with the word Ve'ahi is that God announced that there would be a famine, and God always shares pain and he inflicts on the world. He always shares it. It's not a secret. He says the word Ve'ahi. This is just the word. We're just going off of this word. He said the word Ve'ahi also reflects the mental anguish that Joseph endured in the 2 years of prison after the chief butler was released from jail. Originally, he had intended that Joseph should be released at that time, right? And so he said, how do you endure? So when Joseph was in jail, he was interpreting dreams, and one of the guys leaves. He said, hey, don't forget about your boy. Don't forget about your boy. And so the sage says he was punished by that. And he said he had to endure 2 extra years in jail because he had put trust in a human being. Don't believe in no human being. Believe in God. Whoever tells you to do that, tell him to go away. And he said the Midrash there understands the word Vahi Meketz as indicating the end of darkness. So I want to show you. So I took this information, right, which is the traditions of my ancestors, right, and so we're gonna go over here. So this is academic, and this. I'm telling you, this is the real learning, because the other learning, translating it into Hebrew, is not the key. Translating in Hebrew is the key from the context of understanding how our sages and the generations understood these words and these meanings. And so that's why we use the commentaries to help us navigate. People are like, y'all just listen to the rabbis. Y'all just listen to rap. Okay, fine. Listen to yourself. I don't want to listen to just myself. I want to refine my intellect. And anybody who studied in academia, anyone who's went to school understands that. Understanding the value of understanding other people's thoughts to come to a conclusion of your own thought based off of a veracity of information. So hold on. And so this, okay, hold on. We just go here. Okay, hold on. Yeah, we on Facebook. We on Facebook. Yep, that's where we at. All right. So, okay. So it's like this. So this is what I wrote, right? So the second group of people that we learned from, right? Or that Sefer was, I gave you the name of the Sefer, but the individuals were German Tosfosing, because Rashi was in France. Rashi was European. And people be like, why are you teaching black people about white people? And I'm like, bro, don't talk to me about wisdom. I get wisdom from everywhere. I get wisdom from the Iraqi Jews. I get wisdom from Iranian Jews. I get wisdom from the Yemenite Jews. I get wisdom from Ashkenaz Jews. I get wisdom from African Jews, the Igbos, this, it don't matter. I'm about wisdom, right? So, but I'm showing you how I did not create anything new. All I did was express the information in a way that I understood it. So German Tosfosing, that's what they said, Tosfos, right? That's who we learned. And he says, Tosfos in the 12th and 13th centuries point out, Rashi had a tradition of learning, Ve'ahi Meketz, to mean it was at the end, even though you can find other places with the same phrase being used to mean at the beginning. For example, in Jeremiah, same thing we just read, Miketz Shanim Tishloch, Tishlo, and he says, and at the beginning of 7 years, you should release them again. So that's one commentator. So I use that to express this idea to open this conversation about Miketz, right? Ve'ahi Miketz. Don't just read it. Just don't open the Torah and just read Miketz, Ve'ahi Miketz. No, it's a whole world there. It's a whole world there. And he says the Orach Chaim says that he says the Orach Chaim says the Ve'ahi there is there to indicate distress as a precursor to bad events. Similarly to Parsha Chai Sarah, which states with the word ve'ahivu, which starts with the word ve'ahivu, indicating describing distress prior to us learning about Sarah's death. The Midrashim says Yosef was given 2 additional years in prison. You just read this. I'm not writing anything new. I'm not a genius. He said because he put his trust into a man for his salvation. He says, and that same midrash understands ve'ahi meketz to mean the end of darkness. Ketz, the word, is used to describe our evil inclination, i.e., kol ketz basar, right? And so he says like this, all the desires of the body, right? And so he says, and this is the only thing that I add. Perhaps we could learn it both ways. We have the power to decide the ending of darkness in our life and the beginning of the light. That's the only thing I added to it, right? That's it. That's it. We're just passing on the tradition. That's all a rabbi is. I'm just here to pass down a tradition and to make it tangible for people to connect so they can have their own personal relationship with Hashem, and that's it. And I've written books on it. So the point is saying this is how big. And you know what? And the thing about it, my first book, I Am the Black Jew, I just put I'm black on it. They're like, hey man, I want to hear a black guy write about Torah, right? And so the point is just saying taking our experiences in our life and incorporating it into the learning journey, right? Incorporating it into the learning journey makes this personal. That those two words, Mikeitz, that's the end of darkness, period. Right? No more darkness. No more darkness. And even if something presents itself as darkness, it's the beginning. Beginning of what? The light. That's me. That's me. That I put that together. But you would see something, and your husband would see something, and through the commentaries, and you talk these things out, and you're like, wow, just that one word, Ve'ahi is a whole world. Mikeitz is a whole world. It's not just like you're reading like a great novel. No, that word, you could go on and on and on and to break down the Vav and the Yud and the Hey and the Yud. You could that all that's there too. Right? And so all these things have huge meaning. So I want to go into a little bit on continuing this hand washing thing. We could wrap it up, but we're getting used to this idea of looking and learning in depth and to hear each other's perspectives and to see how we can learn it and appreciating it. And there's no judgment because that's his soul, that's her soul, and you're learning that. So man. So I wanted to do something a little bit interesting in terms of introducing and going into this hand washing thing, and I was stumbled upon some really amazing things. So this sefer was written by a rabbi who's Ethiopian, and he what he was doing was is that he was writing from the Ethiopian perspective and bridging the gap to halakha, because when the temple fell, Jews went all over. Jews went into Africa, Jews went into Middle East, Spain, Europe, the whole thing, right? But there was a group of Jews that were in Babylon after the first temple, and that's when the Talmud was compiled. So a lot of people who did not stay with those communities that had the Talmud, they kind of went off of tradition, like they had an oral tradition, they just kept it. And there were other people who went further into that understanding, because like, what is the basis of the Jewish law today? Right, the basis of the Jewish law is that we don't have a temple. We even now, I'm in Israel. We're not in control of Israel. You know what I mean? We can't build the temple. We can't do sacrifices. But we're here, on a spiritual level. But this isn't the Israel that the Torah is saying we're all going to experience in the future, right? And so that dynamic of understanding that when that temple fell, the sages were faced with the challenge of, okay, so how do we maintain some level of life, of spiritual life, now that we don't have the temple? We don't have, I mean, imagine how long we had the tabernacle before we even had the temple. You know what I mean? Hundreds of years, you know what I mean? And then we had the temple, right? And so now they had that challenge. And so the halakha, in essence, is the sages saying, hey, now that we don't have a temple, we're going to take the Torah, we're going to take the traditions, and then we're going to apply a system of law that we can live by that will allow us to maintain our identity until Mashiach comes. That's it. That's all it is. And so they say, oh, but you're just doing what the rabbis do. Okay, I got it. I hear it. I hear the argument. But I'm following our sages, okay? In every generation, God imbues sages with divine inspiration, right? And so I'm following the sages and saying, I want to operate Shabbat in a way that's in line with the traditions that were prior, right? And so even though traditions did evolve and traditions did progress, and the traditions from one period of time to another tradition, but still I'm in line with the tradition. What's wrong with that? Why do you got to do your own thing? You could do it, but it's just like, I'd rather be in the tradition, right? Me personally, I don't need to figure everything out. Something happens to someone, I have a tradition on how to deal with it. Now I can say, oh, well, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make up my own thing. Okay, fine, cool, great, I get it. Anyways, so in a frame of washing hands, right? I want to just go into that, just get a kind of an outlook before we go into the halakha and the other things. I just want to just see that this is from Africa. All right, so okay, so this is what this author writes about the halakha, and he says, okay, according to Beta Israel custom, okay, this is a custom that they've had for 2,000 years in Ethiopia, right? And they just had, just like you see the people in Igbo land, they have these traditions for thousands of years, so they have customs, right? He says, according to Beta Israel custom, a person should not eat without washing the hands. If there is water nearby, if there's water nearby, if not, one may eat without washing hands. This is their custom. We're looking. This is how we learn Torah. We see how it works. We see how things were 1,000 years ago. It's not. We don't follow people. We follow the tradition, right? And we judge people based off of how they perpetuate the tradition. We don't follow people. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no super rabbi you just follow blindly. If he's not in line with the tradition, that's an issue. Okay, so we're learning about this. Okay. He says before a meal, everyone sits down. The child's hand. He said before a meal, everyone sits down, and a child's hand hands the cup over to each person, beginning with the oldest to the youngest, with the youngest. There's no obligation to dry the hands. Abraham Yardan has noted that one must distinguish between a practice based off of halacha and one based off on culture and technology, such as drying the hands with a towel after washing them. In Ethiopia, the Beta Israel did not dry their hands due to the technical fact that there were no towels. Thus, they did not have the obligation of drying. He said washing the hands was a preparation for the main act of eating. And thus the Beta Israel did not recite a blessing for this. After washing the hands, they begun to eat. If there was a quiche, the quiche was like their Cohen Gadol. That was like their lead. That was their way of saying like the Cohen in essence, right? The Cohen, the quiche, the priest present among the dinner. He said, if there was a priest present among the priest recited a blessing. If there was no quiche, the oldest dinner recited the oldest at the dinner will recite the blessing. After the he says after the honored person took the first bite, every else will begin. The meal continued for some times, yet the length was not important. Rather, what the participants did during the time. Following the meal, a child would once again hand a wash cup to each at dinner, so they might wash their hands. Some wipe their hands after. Some wipe their hands dry after this washing, perhaps because they have eaten with their hands and washing alone was not sufficient to clean them. So he's going to go further into present past and present Talmudic things. So that's what it was in Ethiopia. That's what it was in Africa. And this is probably very similar to most of the tribes throughout Africa and how they had these traditions and how they did things. Now we have this dynamic of the codification with Rabbi Yosef Karl, and it's based around the Talmudic ideas. We're bringing it together and we're putting it into a system, right? She said, in order to understand the sage's ruling about hand washing before eating bread, we should explain several principles about ritual impurity of the body. According to the Torah, the entire body is considered one unit for the purpose of ritual purity and impurity. Neither the entire body is pure or it's entirely impure. Okay, so the body. So when we talk about things being impure and pure, so like for example, so like say like you buy a sweet roll, right? When I was kids, we used to always buy. My parents used to buy these huge sweet rolls on Sunday, and we would heat them up and eat them, right? But like say you spilled some soda, right? You spilled some Sprite on some of your sweet roll. You would take apart that part where the soda spilled, and you would separate it because it's soggy. You don't want it, right? So it's the same thing. Like when something is defiled, in many times you could just separate the part that's been defiled, right? You got a bug falls inside of your soup, God forbid. You could just remove the bug. You don't have to throw away the whole soup. But they said as it relates to the human body, the Torah, especially in the Leviticus, talks about purity and impurity. When it comes to the body is one single unit. So as the body is impure, so well, he's going to go into it, but I just want to make that point. Okay. So in other words, if one part of the body touches an impure item, the entire body becomes impure. For example, if one touches the dead body with his foot, one's entire body is rendered impure, right? So a person, anybody who touches a dead body is impure. They have to go to the mikvah, right? So he's saying it's not about, oh, well, I got to just stick my leg in the mikvah. He says, no, if you touch it on any part of your body, your whole body's impure. So if you touch it with your pinky, your whole body's impure, right? And so, because the Torah sees impurity as one unit as it relates to the human body. Thus, when a person immerses himself in a mikvah, in order to purify himself, he must immerse his entire body in the water at all times, as the Kohanim did in biblical times. So this whole idea of purifying ourselves isn't like some new thing we just created with the Talmud or whatever. No, this goes all the way back to the priest. The people who were in the priestly class were required a certain level of purity. And so that's why they had to do these things. Now that we don't have the temple and we don't have the priest system, we have to keep that same level. But the sages determined that the hands had a special status. They're saying even though the whole body's impure, the hands have a special status. What's the special status? Because they're involved in a plethora of activities and such a wide variety of materials, they get dirtier than the rest of the body. And the person is likely to touch impure items without noticing. Thus, the sages ruled that a person's hands are considered impure, and they are purified by washing with water. So this rule underwent several stages. Okay, so we got that rule, right? So the idea is the body is a singular form. Anything that defiles the body, any part of the body, the whole body is defiled, and there's a purification process. And this goes to the teachings of the Kohanim. And even if push it even further for the people who maybe watching us, to push it even further, the traditions of the Kohanim were taught to Abraham by Melchizedek, who the sages teach us is Shem, right? One of Noah's sons. Shem met with Abraham. He was the king. He was referred to as Melchizedek. He taught Abraham all the priestly traditions. Those priestly traditions were passed on to Isaac, to Jacob, and eventually to the Levim. And Moshe Rabbeinu codified it after Mount Sinai with the inauguration of the Kohanim, the priestly class. So this goes back all the way since the beginning of time, or holiness, because the traditions that Melchizedek has were the traditions he learned from Noah. And Noah learned those traditions from his father, and they go all the way back to Adam Rishon, the first man. So this is nothing new. Is this how we express it in every generation is different. So when we wake up or when we wash our hands, we're not doing a Jewish ritual. We're doing the ritual of the original spirituality, the rituals of Adam, the rituals of Noah, the rituals of Shem, the rituals of Abraham. And it was codified by the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. And so it continues to go on, right? This ruling underwent several stages, right? First, during the first temple, the King Solomon ruled that the hands should be washed before sacrifices. Any person who intended to touch a sacrificial animal must first wash their hands. And if he touched it without washing it, the meat was considered impure. So to even touch the meat before, when you had the lamb, for example, you're going to make, whoever touched the animal to be sacrificed had to wash their hands, and the whole process, their hands had to be clean. When they chopped it up, they had to, have their hands clean. When they brought it on the mishbeach, the altar, they had to have it. All right. So he says during the second temple period, The followers of Shammai and Hillel ruled that the hands were impure for Tuma as well, for Truma. So, like when you were giving your tithe to the priest, the Cohen, you also had to wash your hands. They said, so if a person who trusts the Truma without washing your hands first, rendered unfit for consumption, you couldn't eat it. And in order to avoid this possibility of it being consumed in error, it had to be burned. At the time of the destruction of the second temple, at the time of the time of the second temple, the sages broadened the scope of this commandment, this mitzvah, and ruled it was forbidden to eat bread without the hand washing. Do you see the developments? You see the developments. We're not just making it up. This is like a real Masorah. This is a tradition. And this is his conclusion. Due to similarities between customs and due to the customs, the Beta Israel, this is what he tells his people. This is the same way we're going to give rulings to the African Americans who reemerge, who are descendants of the tribes of the west of Africa and want to come back to these traditions. And the same way you see how he's bridging the gap, this is our job to bridge that gap between the Igbo traditions and the halakha in African American life. So he says, due to the similarities between customs, the Beta Israels may continue to practice as they followed in Ethiopia, because in Ethiopia they wash their hands before every mitzvah. They did this in Ethiopia. On Shabbat and holidays, they would wash their hands before saying kiddush over wine. Wow! And immediately following kiddush, they would say hamotzi. Interesting. And after they wash that, that's such an interesting minhag. Sure, I gotta go back and screenshot that, send that out to some people. Okay. Okay. So, any thoughts, reflections on that idea?
No, I don't have any thoughts. My husband was just I was asking him what something meant, and he just told me that was something that we did, that we currently do. So I don't think I have any questions.
So the key thing is like this. Hold on. The key thing is like this. The point is saying that obviously it's a lot of study, it's a lot of things like that, but what else is there to do to be able to be to learn about God's will and the system and how it manifests and how it develops? And at the end of the day, we're talking about something as simple as washing your hands. But the question is, where's my mind at when I'm doing that? Like, am I washing my hands? Because I could go all over the place. People wash their hands all the time. Or am I in a mindset? I'm saying, like, if for a man and a woman, the difference is that she is being a high priestess and he's being a high priest, right? And they're doing the same customs of the high priest during the times of the Kohanim. And these traditions go all the way back since the beginning of time. Right. And then you could say on a basic level, I mean, there's a hygiene point too. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it has very practical applications, and I would say like this, and I'll leave out on this point. I may have said the story before, but it's always good to say it. So there was a story about Jews that lived in Europe during medieval times, right? And so during that time, a lot of the books that they had were written, were written on parchment. And so a lot of in Europe, the Europeans had a very, very low level of hygiene. And there was a lot of like rats all over the place, like just tons of rats. So the books inside the synagogues used to get eaten by rats, right? Because it was made of parchment. They would just come and just gnaw on it. So what the Jews did was they got cats, right? They would bring in like tons of cats, and they would just put the cats in the community, and then the cats would keep the mice away, the rats away, that they would not be able to go and eat the Torahs, the books, right? Because they just, it was expensive, back then to have, they were handwriting back then, right? And so, anyways, and also because of the halakha, they didn't eat, they couldn't eat rats. You know what I'm saying? Like they couldn't eat rats because that was a halakha, right? And so, when the Black Plague happened, the rats were the ones that were really spreading it. And so because the Jews wouldn't eat rats and they washed their hands, they had those basic levels of hygiene, and the rats weren't coming into the community, the Jews were not dying during these times of the plague, right? And so what happened was is that because the Jews being a small community were not dying and they're totally healthy, and all the people around them were struggling in hospitals, this dying, plagues, thousands of people dead in the bed, they start blaming the Jews and they say, "Hey man, these fools straight poisoned us." And they went and they killed tons of Jews and they murdered. They said it was like so many cats. They literally killed like tons of cats. This is the Europeans. They killed the cats. They killed Jews. They blamed them for doing that just because they were following halakha. And so the point is saying that throughout history, even when you look at Africa and you look at the persecution of the Israelite tribes in the west of Africa and throughout Africa, it's the same types of things. They blame them. They say, "Hey, you guys have manipulated us. You've done this. You guys are insular. You're hiding something." Same thing. So, and then you look at us in America. Same thing. There's just as suspicious of us and this, and we got some secret thing. Two black people are talking to each other. Everyone freaks out. You know, they're like, "What's going on? What are you guys plotting? What is this doing?" No, you can't. You're loving yourself too much. You're loving yourself too much. So it's just saying it's a constant theme that there's these people that have these special souls that the other people react to. And so what I'm saying is that when we look at the halakha, there's very practical things too. Like don't eat certain animals. Don't eat a rat because you don't have food. That's a practical thing. It's a rodent. Now we accept it as a matter of fact, but hundreds of years ago that was not matter of fact, right? 500 years ago, 600 years, 1,000, that was a matter of fact. But the Jews, because of those traditions that were passed down, were able to navigate in different environments, even though they suffered persecution. So, anyways, the point is just to say that, we're building into this learning concept. We're building. So you're back on Thursday.
Yes,
Okay,
Thursday.
perfect. Okay, perfect. Okay, and then with your husband, we may have to do the class earlier tomorrow because I have to go and do this long. I have a really big meeting, and I got to travel like an hour and a half, to a place called Bat Yam for a meeting with the winning West. So, this ended here. Unless there's any questions, any points. Okay, Baruch atah Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen, and we'll continue on. Just